Hi everybody, this is Agnes from Sediment, and today we are going to taste and compare two icons of Bordeaux's Left Bank, Margaux and Pauillac. I have always found it interesting. We pay such incredible attention to terroir in Burgundy. Just one step too far, and all of a sudden you have left the precious Grand Cru vineyards and moved into Premier Cru or even village-level wine. In Bordeaux, it is not quite the same. There, we almost always talk more about the estates than where they are located. Maybe that is because land can be freely bought or sold without it having a major impact on the 1855 classification or, in fact, on how the market perceives the brand. Of course, winemaking choices have naturally huge impact on the style and quality of the finished wine. But there is no denying that the various appellations of the left and right banks do offer stylistic differences, and oftentimes differences in quality as well. So today I want to focus on two probably best known appellations of Bordeaux's Left Bank, Margaux and Pauillac. Bordeaux winemaking region has been greatly defined by the presence of the Atlantic Ocean, which together with Gironde River is responsible for its milder climate and fewer temperature extremes between the seasons, as well as between the day and night. Both AOCs, Margaux and Pauillac, are located on the Médoc Peninsula on the left bank of Gironde River. This area has always been greatly defined by its gravel-rich soils, which were washed down from the Pyrenees by river flows over long periods of time. We are talking millions of years here. And the reason we so often talk about gravel soils when discussing Left Bank is because higher gravel content provides better drainage. And with better drainage comes a better environment for growing Cabernet Sauvignon, which is the star of the Left Bank. Margaux is relatively large appellation if compared with other prestigious appellations of the Left Bank. It encompasses 5 communes instead of just one, and thus covers around 1,400 hectares. The soils in the Margaux AOC are quite varied, but the most important gravel-rich soils are found around the commune of Margaux itself, where the world-famous Chateau Margaux is located, as well as one of my favorite estates, Chateau Palmer. This area is quite close to the river, so naturally ensures well-drained soils. The commune of Arsac, where gravel is mixed with sand and clay, hosts the largest number of classed growths. But as you move further away from this area, the percentage of gravel in the vineyards decreases, and many wine critics and Bordeaux experts argue that quality drops as well. The soils become especially rich around the commune of Soissons, where no class growths are based, and which at one point even had to fight for its right to remain a part of AOC. Because of the size and soil variability, many argue that Margaux is very difficult to generalize about. Of course, we can talk about the differences of terroir and the sizes of the gravel stones, but it also boils down to the differences of the styles of the wines. Margaux is usually described as lighter in body, oftentimes elegant, more perfumed, showing notes of florals, yet still retaining bright and fresh fruit, lively acidity, and finely structured tannins. Interestingly, Cabernet Sauvignon only slightly dominates over Merlot here. In fact, there are some estates that have nearly equal percentages of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot in their Grand Bon blends. We have 21 Cru Classé estates here, including one first growth, loved and admired by many, Chateau Margaux. Now we move down to the river, closer to the Atlantic Ocean, towards Pauillac. A smaller appellation than Margaux, encompassing the town of Pauillac and around 1,200 hectares in size. The number of class growths here is impressive, 18 in total, with 3 of them ranked as first growths, the highest number in any appellation. True, only 2 of them, Chateau Latour and Chateau Lafite Rothschild, trace their history back to the original 1855 classification, while Mouton Rothschild was elevated in 1973. Pauillac is also known for its gravel soils, where in some areas the gravel can run as deep as 9 meters, mixed with sand and clay, thus responsible for better draining soil. Stylistically, Pauillac has always been associated with power, riper and darker fruit profile, tannic grip, and firm backbone. Think of ripe plums, black currant, and blueberries with notes of black cherries. We are talking about highly concentrated, rich fruit profile. And if we look plainly at numbers, Cabernet Sauvignon is by far the dominant grape variety here, covering more than 60% of the total vineyards, while Merlot covers just over 30%. That means we will often see a greater percentage of Cabernet Sauvignon in Pauillac wines, especially in the Grand Vin, while the second and third labels usually show an increase in Merlot dominance. Both Pauillac and Margaux typically use new oak barriques for aging their wines, especially for their Grand Vin, although the percentage of new oak will vary between the estates. The use of new oak or oak at all will usually decrease as we move to the second and third labels. Now that we have gone through theory, it's time to taste. I have gathered 4 wines, 2 from each appellation, and since neither appellation allows white wines under their AOC, we will be tasting only reds today. So let's go! As always, these wines were poured by my cameraman, so I don't know which one is which, and as always, we will start with wine number 1. And as always, expected from Cabernet Sauvignon based blends, you will see deep, rich color. Okay, so wine number 1 actually shows quite classic Bordeaux nose. You have ripe blackberries, blueberries, cassis, but we also have that leafy character, that maybe blackcurrant bush or, crushed leaves of blackcurrant bush in the nose, which I sometimes associate with Bordeaux. It is something that you cannot get that often in other Cabernet Sauvignon-based wines, especially from warmer climates. There's also that spiciness. You have cedarwood, nutmeg, maybe hints of vanilla and sweet toast. You do feel that this wine has been aged in oak and for a generous time. Let's taste the wine. The acidity here is really high, firm, and I could even call it structured. I could similarly describe the tannin here. There's plentiful of tannin. It is firm, maybe slightly astringent. I don't know, not necessarily astringent, but there's some kind of unripeness or greenness to the tannin here in this wine. But in no way it is unbalanced or not part of the wine or maybe overpowering the fruit here. Now, with a bit of time, with few minutes in the glass, I do feel that leafiness, that maybe capsicum-like elements in the wine a bit more than maybe previously. Previously, it was more dominated by riper fruit profile. And this goes to all of those, I don't want to call you haters, but all of those who say wine needs to breathe. Not necessarily, not always. I will always support wine's ability to tell you story in the glass. We do not drink wine as a shot of vodka. We pay attention. Usually glass goes for several minutes, 20, 30 minutes even sometimes, and you can follow its development in the glass. I find it much more exciting, at least for me. This was short pause. Yes, this wine somehow to me shows more of that leafiness, more of that spiciness, and now with time the fruit has gone towards the background of the wine. I feel it is maybe medium plus bodied. It is definitely not the hottest vintage out there. It might be from maybe cooler or wetter vintage. This seems to me, at least on the palate. The alcohol is also not that prominent on the palate. I would say it's well balanced. I will give this wine 90 points, and now we move to wine number 2. Okay, so this wine somehow seems more developed on the nose. If in wine number 1 we had riper but fresh fruit profile, here we have some of the chocolate, some of the toasted coffee beans maybe dipped in a chocolate, We have some truffles. And as expected, it is deep in color. Only now it is not ruby, it is more garnet. And similarly as with wine number 1, we do have some of that greenness, some of that leafiness, but here it is riper in character. Or maybe there is more of that fruit that covers the leafiness or covers the blackcurrant bush crushed leaf element. And also what is interesting, I just noticed, I feel like pencil shaving or graphite hint here. If I wouldn't know that we are in the left bank of Bordeaux, I would want to argue that there is some Cabernet Franc in here. It could be as well, but definitely not a lot. Okay, let's taste the wine. All right, wine number 2 offers fuller, richer mid-palate. It is more rounder mid-palate. Wine number 1 was really rather slim in its mid-palate, and wine number 2 is bolder. It has really distinct, firm, finely knit tannin structure, which I like. And in wine number 1, the tannin was more, part of the fruit, part of the crushed fruit skins. And here it is like a frame. It adds a backbone, it adds the skeleton to the wine. And fruit maybe is grown around the tannin. Acidity is quite high, beautifully and well integrated within the wine. For me, this wine seems to be a bit older in age. So you do have those tertiary aromas, which I mentioned in the very beginning, that chocolate, that coffee bean, maybe, hints of forest floor as well, and like autumn mushrooms and autumn leaves. Overall, I would also like to place this wine in a classic left bank Bordeaux category, which of course is also a quality factor. The fact that you can recognize it, the fact that it is typical, I think speaks volumes. And I will give this wine 93 points. I think because of the concentration or more density or tightly knit fruit on the mid palate, I prefer this stylistically a bit more than wine number 1. So let's move to wine number 3. Okay. I know for a fact that I do not have a very, very old wine here. I do have 10 plus, but I don't have 20 or 30 plus. And this wine number 3 on the nose, seems a bit older than that. So color-wise, it also has that brick hint, not necessarily like really brick, but it is garnet with an orange hint at the end or at the rim. And on the nose, I feel like blackcurrant berries dipped in a balsamic or, mixed. Sometimes we mix strawberries with balsamic vinegar. So there is hint of that balsamic vinegar here, which is interesting. And old wines can get there. Sometimes they do get those elements in the wine with age. I often find the balsamic hints in Brunellos a lot. So it was quite confusing to feel it here. There's also bottle variation, and maybe specific bottles were not kept to perfection. That could also be it. Anyway, I do not think that any classic Bordeaux of Left Bank especially should smell so intensely of balsamic notes. Saying that, it is not wine gone. It is still here. It is just maybe too developed for its age. And we still have those maybe dried cherries and dried raspberries and blackcurrant notes. We do also have that spiciness, that cinnamon, that vanilla and nutmeg. And you feel that there is quite impressive concentration of the fruit. It is just now intervened with those hints of balsamic. Let's taste the wine finally. Okay, on the palate, wine is actually quite clean. We do have developed berries, we do have crushed raspberries and and black cherries and plums, maybe slightly dried as well. But on the palate, I would want to say that this wine is much brighter and more livelier than maybe the nose showed. What is really interesting, I particularly find it really interesting because I feel like the tannin here is really structured. It is really mouth coating. It is covering all the palate, you know, quite intensely. There is power. It feels like it feels like there's a fist, and something is covering that powerful fist. I don't know, like soft mitten glove, soft glove. On the palate, actually, I love this wine. I enjoyed the openness, the richness, the texture of the fruit, the mouth coating, that really firm tannin. I think it's beautiful. What is interesting is that wine number 1 and 2, they had higher, more precise, fresher acidity, and here maybe the acidity is a bit lacking for my palate. Like I would want to have it more fresher or livelier, but that's just my personal preference, and I will give this wine 93 points, 92.5 because of the nose. But it's not its fault. It was probably poorly stored bottle. So let's move to wine number 4. Okay, this seems so fresh and lively, you know, alive and kicking. If we are comparing it to the wine number 3, it is all bright, black, ultra-ripe fruit, but none of the evolution in it. The fruit was just so seductive that without much talking about it, I decided to taste the wine. And on the palate, it really beautifully mirrors that richness, that ripeness, that opulence of the fruit that it showed on the nose. It's interesting because I expect Bordeaux to be a bit slimmer, especially if we are talking about the appellations that we are tasting today, Margaux and Pauillac. And maybe, yes, Pauillac can sometimes be a bit bigger, but still it is really kind of masculine, but masculine like ballerina-like ballet dancers. They are really masculine. There's not a lot of fattiness to their bones, but they're really tight, you know, they're really slim. And I would expect these two appellations to be similar in that way. And this one seems rich and ripe and opulent, almost like bodybuilders, you know, they're also all muscle, but they're also really big. But not, you know, but sometimes when you talk about bodybuilders in reference to wine, it might seem a bit offensive because, you know, those big and kind of built up wines. This is not it. It is definitely not built up wine. It might be due to the riper, sunnier vintage. It might be due to the winemaking as well. Tannin here is really ripe. It is not as firm as with wine number 3. It is still covering your palate and dominating your palate. It is still adding that backbone, that skeletal feel to the wine, but they're much riper. They're almost sweeter in the character. And I do think that this is a huge crowd pleaser. I think this wine is something that people enjoy a lot. They feel comfortable with it. And I think it almost seems polished. I will give this wine 93.5 points. So 92.5, 93.5. I'm very happy with my scores, and now we shall reveal them. All right, we're going to start with the lowest scored wine, which was wine number 1. All right, so this is the 5th growth of Pauillac, Chateau Haut-Bages Libéral. We have to be really honest with this wine. 2017 was not the easiest vintage out there. So of course that also shows on the nose. And we did feel that unripeness, that leafy character as well. But overall, it was 90 points. It's fine. So let's move to wine number 2. Oh, I'm sorry. It was Pauillac. So we are in the Pauillac territory with the first wine. So let's move to wine number 2. Okay, so now we are in Margaux territory, which is Chateau Giscours. I have visited this estate and I have very good memories about it. I do enjoy it. Could I say that it had that typical that we discussed before, Margaux elegance and purity of fruit and flowery part? No, I actually thought that the tannin was quite firm and it was bigger, a bit richer on the mid palate as well, as opposed to wine number 1, which is from Pauillac. And it is actually 5 years older than the wine number 1. And I think it was quite well managed and it has spent quite a lot of time in my own cellar. And I'm happy that it was still as fresh and as inviting as it is now. 93 points that was. Really good. Also quite difficult and challenging vintage. Let's move to wine number 3, which I thought was quite beautiful on the palate and maybe too developed on the nose. And I gave this one 92.5. This is also the most expensive on this selection. So we are in Pauillac again. Chateau Pontet-Canet 2012 vintage, another very difficult vintage. And if I'm not mistaken, this is also the 5th growth. And surprisingly, a lot of wine consumers, a lot of wine experts and Bordeaux critics do not consider it the 5th growth. They actually believe it should be rated much higher. Nowadays, of course, this estate has gone through ups and downs over its history, as many Bordeaux estates of Medoc. And as I mentioned when I was tasting this wine, I told you there was this concentration, there was this power. You could kind of feel it really well. Yeah, maybe it is also the stylistic difference or the stylistic choice of the estate. I can say I've been tasting a lot of Pontet-Canet wines over the last years, so maybe there's something I don't know. So if you have some answers, please comment in the section below. That leaves us with the last wine from Margaux, and let's move to the wine number 4, which was the highest scored wine, 93.5. Another classed growth, Chateau de Saint Margaux, and it's a no-brainer. It is 2016 vintage, one of the best vintages in Bordeaux in the last decade, if not last 20 years. I mean, if I have a possibility to get my hands on 2016 vintage, I will usually do that. And this is where it shows how important is the vintage in the area. Of course, how you manage your wines, your decisions in the winery, grape selection, it goes a long way. It's really, really important. But here we could also see that it was the vintage that shined, and I was talking about the ripeness, the richness of the fruit here, the vibrancy of the fruit, and it was so fresh, 9 years old. Amazing. I guess I would want to say that the power and the tannin structure that we so often associate with Pauillac was most present in the wine number 3. I here really felt the tannic firmness and the backbone. And to be honest, that elegance maybe was more here. I don't think that Chateau Haut-Bages Libéral 2017 showed itself really well. You know, it was that leafy character that sometimes we associate with unripe vintages. And Chateau de Saint 2016, it's very difficult to judge it. I am not completely convinced that this is the typical style of the Margaux, but then again, it is the representation of the Margaux AOC, so why not? Let me know in the comment section below which appellation you personally prefer better. Is it Margaux? Is it Pauillac? Is it maybe Saint-Julien or Saint-Estèphe? And let me know also which appellation should I contrast and taste against each other next. And if you like this video and if you do enjoy Bordeaux wines in general, make sure to watch this video next.